Imagine trying to build a 12-story skyscraper,
Huh.
right? But every single floor is the size of a postage stamp.
Oh, wow. Okay, go.
And you have to align like all the plumbing, the electrical wiring perfectly, from the foundation all the way up to the penthouse.
Mm.
But here is the real catch. You have to build this entire structure blindfolded.
Right, which sounds completely impossible.
Completely. And if a single microscopic wire on, say, the 9th floor doesn't connect absolutely perfectly to the 10th floor, you have to throw the entire multi-million-dollar building right in the trash.
Yeah.
That is essentially the multi-billion-dollar nightmare that these semiconductor giants are facing right now with AI chips.
It really is. I mean, it's a phenomenal engineering bottleneck. We are talking about precision that operates on a scale where, a surgical scalpel would look like a blunt, primitive instrument.
Like a sledgehammer, basically.
Exactly. The entire global AI boom, all of it, is currently bottlenecked by the physical reality of just trying to stack these chips together without destroying them in the process.
Which brings us to the live market data flashing across our desks this morning. So, welcome to today's deep dive. Today is Monday, May 4, 2026. And while everyone else is, watching NVIDIA's trillion-dollar valuations or arguing over geopolitical battles regarding data centers, we're looking at something else entirely.
Right. The real story today is happening at a microscopic level in South Korea.
Yeah, exactly. There is this South Korean company called Auros Technology. The KOSDQ ticker is 3222037 for those following along. And at the opening bell today, their stock just absolutely exploded.
It was wild to watch.
Right. We are looking at a single-day jump of 28.26%. That drove the price up to 44,250 Korean won. So that pushes their market cap to roughly 398.55 billion won.
Which is huge.
Yeah, I mean, for a hardware supplier that most people outside of highly specialized foundry circles have never even encountered, a nearly 30% single-day move is staggering.
Well, market moves of that magnitude for a hardware supplier, they rarely happen just because of, like, a quarterly earnings beat, When you see a sudden vertical re-rating like that, the market is pricing in a completely new fundamental reality for the company's future.
Meaning what, exactly?
It signals that a specialized vendor is transitioning. They're becoming a foundational, non-negotiable pillar of a major supply chain.
Okay, and that is exactly our mission for you today. We're taking the latest investment banking notes, technical industry reports from April, these wild intraday stock charts, and we're going to synthesize all of it. We want to figure out how a relatively obscure semiconductor equipment supplier, spent over a decade in the shadows, broke a seemingly impenetrable U.S. monopoly and became the ultimate picks and shovels play for giants like Samsung and SK Hynix.
It's a great underdog story, really.
It is. But to get there, we need to look at the massive problem Auros is actually solving. So let's talk about the yield war in high bandwidth memory, or HBM.
Right, so the current state of play is this massive high-stakes battle between SK Hynix and Samsung.
The two heavyweights.
Exactly. They are fighting for dominance over the HBM supply contracts that basically feed NVIDIA's AI processors.
Because the winner of those contracts essentially gets to ride the primary economic wave of the entire AI boom.
Yeah, precisely. But there is a really critical discrepancy between the two right now. SK Hynix has a distinct lead in their 12 hybrid bonding validation.
Meaning they're stacking 12 of those microscopic skyscraper floors successfully.
Right. They are already raising yields for mass production. Samsung, on the other hand, is trailing. Their yields are lower right now.
Okay, let's unpack this. When you are manufacturing at this scale, lower yields mean you are literally throwing away fortunes in ruined silicon, right?
Yes, exactly. You're tossing out very expensive garbage.
So if SK Hynix is successfully stacking 12 incredibly complex dies on top of each other and getting them to communicate flawlessly, they are solving that skyscraper problem. And Samsung is, well, they're desperate to close that gap.
They have to. They really have no choice.
So let's look at the failure points. In hybrid bonding, from what the reports say, they're connecting tiny copper pads on one die directly to the copper pads on the die right above it. Where does Auros step in to stop the bleeding for Samsung?
They step in with a system called the HE900IR.
Okay.
It's an infrared overlay tool. And to understand why this is just strictly non-negotiable for Samsung, you have to look at the physics of the stacking process itself.
Right, because we are talking about physical objects here.
Exactly. When you place a silicon wafer on top of another one, visible light cannot penetrate the silicon.
So it's like a brick wall.
Right. You are effectively blind. Standard optical metrology tools, the ones that bounce light off the surface to measure patterns, they are entirely useless here.
Because the critical connections are hidden.
Yeah, the critical copper-to-copper bonds are hidden deep inside the stack.
Wait, hold on. So if VPO light just bounces off, how does infrared actually solve the problem? Does infrared actually pass through solid silicon?
Yes, that is the crucial physical property at play here. Silicon is opaque to the visible light spectrum, sure, but it is largely transparent to specific wavelengths of infrared light.
Oh, wow. So it acts almost like glass.
Exactly like glass. So the HE900IR, it shines a highly calibrated infrared beam straight through the silicon wafer. The light passes right through the silicon, but it reflects off those microscopic copper pads.
I see.
By capturing that reflection, the tool can literally see inside the stacked skyscraper and measure the exact alignment of those internal connections. And it does this before the final permanent bonding process occurs.
Okay, so they are catching the fatal flaws before the building is condemned.
Precisely.
Because if you know the pads are misaligned by, like, a fraction of a micron, you can halt the process, adjust the bonding tool, and save the batch.
You save the batch, and honestly, more importantly, you feed that alignment data back into the manufacturing loop.
To fix the root cause.
Right, you correct the machinery for the next 1,000 wafers. This infrared metrology is mandatory for the upcoming HBM4, HBM4E, and HBM5 cycles.
Because you physically cannot scale hybrid bonding without knowing if your internal alignment is perfect.
You just can't. It's a hard physical limit.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. Chip foundries are notoriously conservative, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they hate changing equipment vendors because the downtime and the integration risks cost them millions.
Oh, absolutely. They are incredibly risk-averse.
And the industry reports note that a massive U.S. company, KLA, has held a strict, undisputed monopoly over IR metrology for these HBM cycles for years.
Yep, they were the undisputed kings of that space.
So if KLA had this market completely locked down, why would Samsung suddenly rip out established KLA equipment to install gear from a South Korean firm with a market cap under $300 million? I mean, Auros must have offered them a technological wedge that KLA just couldn't match.
Well, you are exactly right to focus on the switching costs, because foundries do not change vendors lightly. The shift really comes down to a combination of architectural evolution and supply chain strategy.
Okay, break that down for me. Start with the architecture.
Technologically, as we move from 8-high to 12-high and eventually 16-high HBM stacks, the physical warpage of the wafers becomes incredibly severe.
The silicon actually bends.
Yes, the silicon physically bends under the stress of multiple layers being stacked and heated. It warps. And Auros spent years fine-tuning their algorithms specifically to measure alignment on severely warped wafers.
Wow.
They worked intimately with SK Hynix initially to figure this out, before finally breaking into Samsung's supply chain in 2023. KLA makes fantastic universal tools, but Auros built a highly customized solution for this exact local nightmare.
And then there's the strategic standpoint. I mean, Samsung clearly needs a domestic champion, right?
Yes, that is a huge part of the puzzle.
Because relying entirely on a foreign monopoly for the single tool that dictates your most advanced AI memory yields, that's a massive geopolitical and operational risk.
Definitely. Having a domestic partner in South Korea means Samsung's engineers can work directly with Auros engineers in real time. They can customize the hardware on the fly without waiting for a massive U.S. conglomerate to update its global product line.
And that domestic integration is moving rapidly, based on the sources. The financial footprint of this relationship really proves it isn't just a pilot experiment anymore. We are seeing definitive purchase orders that alter the financial gravity of Auros as a company.
Yeah, the numbers are striking. Samsung ordered 2 of these HE900IR systems.
Right, let's translate those orders into actual business impact for the listener. The pricing for the HE900IR sits at about 3 billion won, which is roughly $2.2 million per machine.
Okay.
So 2 machines equals a 6 billion won order. Now, $4.4 million might sound like a rounding error to a giant like NVIDIA, but look at Auros' total revenue.
That's a completely different scale.
Right. Their projected 2024 revenue was 61.4 billion won. That single order of just 2 machines represented nearly 10% of their entire annual revenue.
It perfectly illustrates the operating leverage in semiconductor equipment manufacturing,
How so?
Well, once you pass that grueling years-long qualification phase and you actually get designed into the facility, the revenue scales violently. And Auros isn't just relying on that one infrared tool either.
Right. The reports mentioned other tools.
Yeah, they also locked in a 9.6 billion won contract last year for their OL 900 NW overlay inspection tool, which handles the HBM pad alignment on the surface. So they are attacking the HBM yield bottleneck from multiple angles.
But the integration goes even deeper than overlay alignment. The report shows Samsung is also pulling in Auros MT30T measurement system.
Right, the MT30T. That addresses a different but equally critical architectural challenge in HBM stacking.
Which is what?
Chip spacing.
Okay.
When you stack these dies, you aren't just mashing them together. There are microscopic gaps, usually filled with underfill materials, and those gaps are vital for thermal management.
Because AI chips get incredibly hot.
Exactly. If the chips are too close, the heat generated by the AI processing will literally melt the stack.
Oh, wow.
But if they're too far apart, the electrical signals degrade. The MT30T ensures that the physical spacing between each of the 12 floors of our skyscraper is just absolutely flawless.
And the scale of deployment for the MT30T is really aggressive. These systems were slated for installation at Samsung's Cheonan and Anyang advanced packaging facilities by early December.
Yeah, they are moving fast.
And the reports indicate Samsung is already evaluating an order for at least 5 more units. That brings the total value of just the MT30T rollout to 15 billion won. So we aren't just talking about a couple of pilot machines in a lab anymore.
No, not at all. Auros is embedding itself into the permanent physical footprint of Samsung's most advanced memory factories.
They've crossed the chasm, basically.
They really have. They are no longer an alternative vendor being tested, you know. They're a keystone partner being scaled. The KLA monopoly in this specific vertical has been decisively broken in South Korea.
Okay, so that covers the historical context and the HBM yield war perfectly. But honestly, we still haven't answered the most important question of the day.
Which is why the stock jumped today.
Exactly. The Samsung contracts from last year explain Auros' steady growth, sure. But markets are forward-looking mechanisms. None of the HBM overlay contracts explain a violent 28% stock spike today in May 2026. What is the immediate catalyst that has investors rushing into this stock this morning?
Right. Well, the catalyst is a massive leap from the back-end packaging process into the much larger, much more lucrative world of front-end semiconductor manufacturing.
Front end, okay.
Yeah. The industry notes published in early April of this year highlighted the impending high-volume manufacturing, or HVM, ramp-up of an entirely new product line for Auros.
And what is this new product line?
It is their ultra-precision thin film thickness measurement equipment.
In film thickness. So wait. We are no longer looking at how stacked chips align. We are looking at the literal atomic layers of material being deposited onto the raw silicon wafer before the chip is even fully built.
Correct. The front-end process is where the actual transistors are created from scratch. And to understand the market reaction today, you have to grasp the mind-bending physics of what this new tool actually does.
Try me.
It measures these deposited films at the angstrom level.
Okay, we need to contextualize the angstrom level for everyone listening, because human brains are just not wired to comprehend that scale.
Fair enough.
10 angstroms equal 1 nanometer. So we are talking about a machine operating at the 1 nanometer scale. Measuring something at the angstrom level isn't like, just using a tiny ruler under a microscope.
Not at all. At that scale, optical microscopes are literally useless because the features you are trying to measure are smaller than the wavelength of visible light itself.
So how do you even measure it? To put this in perspective for you, this isn't just finding a needle in a haystack. This is like trying to measure the exact thickness of a single coat of paint on a house while looking at it from outer space.
That's a great analogy.
So how does the machine actually do it? Is it like listening to a light echo?
Essentially, yes. If you bounce a highly specific polarized wave of light off the surface of the wafer, the light travels through that microscopic thin film, hits the substrate below, and reflects back up.
Okay.
By measuring the exact phase shift, basically the interference pattern of how that light changed when it bounced back, the machine can calculate the exact thickness of the film down to the nanometer.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an excellent breakdown of ellipsometry and optical reflectometry. You are analyzing the change in the polarization state of light to determine the film's thickness and refractive index.
Okay, but why does this technology fundamentally alter Auros' valuation so much more than the overlay tools?
It all comes down to the total addressable market. The overlay tools we discussed earlier, they're used primarily before and after lithography to ensure patterns align.
Right, just checking if the blueprints match.
Exactly. It is a vital but narrow application. But thin film thickness measurement. That is required across almost the entire front-end manufacturing chain.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. The reports specifically highlight its use during etching, where you are carving material away. It's used during deposition, where you are adding new atomic layers. And it's used during chemical mechanical polishing, or CMP, where you are grinding the wafer perfectly flat.
Ah, I see. Because when a foundry deposits a layer of material, it doesn't just magically lay down perfectly flat across a 300-millimeter wafer.
Right. Physics is messy.
It might be a nanometer thicker on the edge than in the center. And if you don't map that thickness instantly and adjust the deposition tool, the transistors on the edge of the wafer will just fail entirely.
Precisely. By deploying this angstrom-level thickness tool across etching, deposition, and CMP, foundries can detect defective uniformity instantly.
So they catch the errors at the 1 nanometer scale.
Yes, long before the wafer ever makes it to the incredibly expensive hybrid bonding and packaging stages that we talked about earlier.
You drastically improve the yield of the foundational silicon itself.
Exactly, which saves unimaginable amounts of money.
And this brings us to the immense risk and reward that the market is trading on today. The investor notes reveal that Auros has not just been designing this in a lab.
No, they're in the field.
Right. They have actually been supplying these thin film thickness units to a major domestic chip maker, which the industry heavily assumes is either Samsung or SK Hynix for qualification testing.
Yeah.
And they have been running these tests since the third quarter of last year.
And we should note, qualification testing in front-end manufacturing is a brutal, unforgiving process.
How so?
You are running the equipment nonstop, 1047, for months or even years. The foundry is testing if your laser remains perfectly calibrated over time.
Right.
They're testing if your software algorithms can handle millions of data points without crashing. And most importantly, if your measurements actually correlate to higher yields in the final product.
Well, the April report stated that the evaluation was progressing very positively, and Auros was aiming to complete the entire qualification process within this year to secure formal high-volume manufacturing orders.
But there is a risk.
Yeah, the investor note explicitly outlines the risk. If the qualification fails, the product line is basically dead in the water.
True. But the upside is what is driving the 28% spike today. If they secure mass supply of this 1 nanometer thickness tool, the financial projections shift dramatically.
How dramatically?
The notes estimate that annual revenue for this single new segment could exceed 100 billion won.
Okay, think about the math on that for a second. Auros' entire company revenue for 2024 was around 61 billion won.
All right.
If this thin film tool enters mass production, this one product line will generate more revenue than the entire company did 2 years ago. It completely transforms their financial baseline.
It is a profound structural shift. They are evolving from a niche provider of back-end HBM alignment tools to a foundational, high-volume supplier for the most advanced front-end manufacturing processes on Earth.
It's massive.
Yeah, the market is looking at the progress of that grueling qualification testing, looking at the insatiable demand for flawless AI silicon, and placing a massive bet that Auros is going to pass the test.
So let's step back and look at the whole board. We started today by tracking a violent market anomaly, right? A near 30% spike in a South Korean hardware stock.
Yep.
But by unpacking the mechanics of semiconductor manufacturing, we have watched Auros Technology execute a masterclass in technological disruption. They didn't try to beat KLA at everything.
No, that would have been impossible.
They targeted the single most painful bottleneck in the AI revolution, the severe wafer warpage and yield failures in stacking high-bandwidth memory. And they built the exact infrared overlay tools required to solve it.
Right, and they leveraged that initial wedge with SK Hynix to prove their capability, eventually breaking KLA's monopoly within Samsung's advanced packaging facilities.
They became the domestic champion Samsung desperately needed to secure their HBM supply chain.
Exactly.
And now, rather than resting on those massive HBM contracts, they are pushing their optical technology to the absolute brink. By mastering ellipsometry and reflectometry, they are supplying measurement tools capable of operating at the angstrom level.
They are positioning themselves to capture a massive share of the broader front-end manufacturing market.
They are moving from measuring the skyscraper's alignment to measuring the actual atomic composition of the steel used to build it.
That's a really good way to put it. The broader takeaway for anyone observing the technology sector right now is that hardware simply cannot exist without metrology.
You have to be able to measure it.
Exactly. The ambition of AI design has entirely outpaced the physical limitations of manufacturing. You cannot build what you cannot measure.
So the next time you are scrolling through the news and you see a headline about a massive new AI model requiring tens of thousands of GPUs, or you see NVIDIA breaking another market cap record, keep this story in mind.
Absolutely.
Remember that absolutely none of that software, none of those data centers, and none of those trillion-dollar valuations can physically exist without the microscopic, highly precise work being done by companies like Auros. They are the ultimate picks and shovels of the AI gold rush.
But, looking at the trajectory of this technology leaves us with a rather profound, almost existential question for the future of hardware.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we just discussed Auros measuring thin films at the angstrom scale today to secure these massive new contracts. And as you said, 10 angstroms make up 1 nanometer. To put that in perspective, an individual silicon atom is roughly 2 angstroms wide.
Wait, really? So we are quite literally measuring individual atoms. There is no smaller building block in the physical supply chain.
Exactly, which means we are rapidly approaching the absolute impassable limits of physical reality. The entire semiconductor industry has relied on Moore's law, the consistent shrinking of transistors, to drive exponential growth.
Right.
But what happens to the incredible AI hardware boom when our manufacturing processes finally hit that atomic wall? Can this industry and the valuations attached to it continue to grow when there is, quite literally, no room left to measure?